Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Today's a great show. It is about poop and specifically fecal transplants. So, we're going to do a special bonus that's a surprise in the middle to end of this that goes beyond fecal transplants. But first, let me bring on one of the best veterinarians of the world, one of my good friends and partner here at Gussys Gut, Dr. Ian Billinghurst.
Good morning,
Good,
everybody. Good morning, Rob. Great to
good
be here.
morning. Good morning to you, and good afternoon to me. And
That's
uh,
right. All,
are you
all
ready
that.
to talk poop transplants?
Uh, Absolutely enthralled, actually. I'm really looking forward to this because this is going to be a great learning experience.
Well, this is, I'd say grab the share link in YouTube or Facebook and send this to your vet if this is something you're interested in, because we'll try to do some high and some medium, low level at the consumer level and also the veterinary level. So let's get into it. One of the finest veterinarians, actually from one of our previous podcasts that was referred to us by Dr. Odette Suter, she's a leader in this space and somebody I've just had the most fun getting to know, Dr. Margo Roman.
Hello, how are you guys? Thank you for inviting me. And first of all, I want to tell everybody how much I love Ian for introducing me to the raw diet for my animals. I had already started doing it and really had very little guidance until I had his lecture at the AHVMA convention over 20 years ago. And with that, it really gave me the confidence to support my clients and understand that we need to have this raw bacteria food in our diets. I mean, everything has bacteria in it. And so we needed this to balance out the gut. And it's been a struggle standing up to other veterinarians and universities and people saying that you're going to kill everybody if you give a raw diet. And so I've been feeding raw diets for over 35 years. And so he's been one of the people I really cherish, the knowledge that he's given me. And now I'm going to give him some of my good shit that I'm going to give him, which is understanding the microbiome. And the microbiome, we all thought that these animals, we had to get rid of all this material that was coming out of it. It was contaminated and it was poison and it was killing us, and bacteria. And we realized that has been like 80% of our immune system is coming from our gut. So it's really important that we respect it and we care for it and we nurture it. And that's one of the things that I've been doing on this generations for 6 generations, now 7 generations of dogs that have been nurtured, given only organic, fresh, raw food for over 30 years. So it's really important that, I share that with a lot of people because most people have not done that. I'd say I haven't heard of anybody who's done that, because as a holistic integrated veterinarian, I have so many choices to use to treat. I haven't used antibiotics on these generations for 30 years. So I have acupuncture and herbs and homeopathy and ozone and combinations of first aid stuff that's just healthy to use instead of using antibiotics. And so my clients appreciate it. These dogs have grown into very healthy animals and live long lives. And so that's an important component that I think is overlooked, but not anymore. Now the microbiome is becoming the state of the art of medicine, is that we respect that microbiome. And even the AVMA, the American Veterinary Medical Association, came out in 2020 and said we can no longer throw antibiotics at everything. We have to be judicious about our antibiotic use. And that's really important because if we don't take care of that gut, it's not going to take care of us. And that's our immune system.
Well, this is great. This is a great start. I just want to do a quick little, and I do want Ian to get in a word in here at the beginning, but
I don't know.
I just want to
Can I
say,
say one word?
yeah, I just want
Game.
to say, quick thought is 30 years ago, you were introduced to raw, and they've been saying for 30 years that it'll kill your dog. And look at where we are. No dogs have died in our care. Certainly mine haven't. Yours and all of your care and all of your patients' care. And imagine where we're going to be in 30 years with the microbiome. I mean, that's pretty amazing. So I'll just say that. And number 2, I think let's go back just a step. At some point, I'd like to talk to people about who don't know what fecal transplants are or any of this, I'd like to just a real quick 30-second overview of what that is.
Okay, so we have many different ways that we can deliver the fecal to a dog. Transplant is not opening them up and putting the fecal into the abdomen. We simply give them give it to them rectally. And first, I always use medical ozone to reduce my biofilm, and then I make a slurry of my dog's fecal, and we screen and test our dog's fecal for any parasites that are typical that dogs would get. And we give them a enema of this fecal and leave it in there. We do it standing with them awake, and we don't put them under general anesthesia. And then we give them oral to sort of feed both ends. So we're putting it in the rear end, and we give them oral, and it comes in capsules and nuggets. And we have different double wall capsules and triple wall capsules, and freeze dried and regular frozen. And so we have a lot of different ways to get animals to consume it. And at the same time, we're nurturing the gut. So the term microbiome restorative therapy is what I coined over 12 years ago, instead of FMT, which is fecal microbiota transplantation. And it's because we need to restore it. We need to put this stuff in there and nurture it, not just throw it out there and hope something sticks. We really want to make sure it does mesh from one end to the other.
Great. Dr. B, questions?
Oh, no, I'm just listening.
Okay.
I've got lots of thoughts, but I just want to sit here and learn from an expert. So
okay.
At this stage, I'm just like everybody else, sitting here, mouth wide open and listening, and ears as well.
Good. So let me do some consumer targeted backfill of what you said.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned a couple things that I think people will wonder what that means. So
I'm going to put my lights on, so I feel like
you bet.
Fading in the dark here.
There we go.
I look like I'm getting going. I'm going to put some lights.
So you said something about double wall capsules. So that's to protect as it goes down.
Yeah, I mean, so we're doing triple wall. Well, we do double walls mostly, and we've done some triple walls. And so the idea is that if we can get the microbiome deeper into the small intestines, which is where most of the lymphatics is, and make sure it gets in there, then I want to make sure it gets in there. So there are different types of capsules that we use. And then we also have just nuggets. So if we want to get it right into the stomach, we just do the nuggets. And that way it breaks up in the stomach wall, because there's lots of bacteria in the stomach and that are used to acid. And I don't want the ones that don't have as much acid to get damaged before they get to the small intestines.
Right.
So, and then the ones in the colon, some of them are from way upstream, and some of them are, only located in the intestines. So by doing it at both ends, we're trying to get it all along. And then we also use what we call our biofilm restorative water. My dogs in 30 years have never had one piece of plaque, one piece of tartar. I've never cleaned my dog's teeth. They've never lost a tooth, no gingivitis in my cats and dogs. And in studying with biological dentists, it's the biofilm in your mouth that causes tartar and plaque and gingivitis. And so if my dogs have a balanced microbiome in their mouth that doesn't cause those things, then I need to share it. So we share my dog's water bowl water with our clients. So I take it and put it in glass jars, and then they take their water bowl, use boiling water, no chemicals, and put spring water in there, and then put a teaspoon of mine and let it populate. And then their dogs drink it, and we're getting rid of tartar. We're getting rid of gingivitis. And they use ozone too. We use ozone oil on the mouth to try to break up the biofilm so that this bacteria can actually adhere to it.
Okay.
Because in your mouth there are 100 trillion microbes. So it's a front end, back end, through the whole course.
Yeah. What you're for people watching, listening, it's what, Dr. Roman's trying to do is get them at the top end, which is the gut, the stomach, the lower intestine, the upper intestine, lower intestine, and then the colon. So she's trying to get that whole tract.
But even the mouth, because the mouth has 1 trillion microbes, and they contribute down to this 100 trillion.
Yeah. Amen to that. Okay.
Yeah.
And then I want to also talk about real quick biofilm. So it's my understanding that the reason you're using ozone, it's pure oxygen. It is to just gently and naturally, pure oxygen, break up any biofilm that's preventing the slurry, which is a mix of, it's a light, watery mix of this fecal matter that you're injecting into the rear end via a syringe without a needle. It's no needle syringe, just a head on it. And so that those microbes can attach and take. If there's a biofilm, that protects it from anything good and, frankly, it keeps a lot of bad things in there. Is that right?
Yes. So we're doing, when we're doing the fecal, we mix it with saline. So try to make it as isotonic as it can be. And ozone is actually O3 and O2, and a very small percentage of O3, which is the killing action that happens. That's where ozone is used to clean our atmosphere, and that's where it falls down from lightning and cleans our earth. And that fresh smell that you smell after a thunderstorm, lightning storm, is all ozone, and that's killing bacteria and fungi and things that are over polluting our earth.
Yep.
And gives it a fresh smell. So the same thing, we're going to use ozone to sort of break up this biofilm. And then by breaking up the biofilm, we have a clean surface that we can send this microbiome to sort of go over that surface and find new places to set up their own little colonies there.
Great.
So,
Okay.
Margo, what's the biofilm made of?
The biofilm is a combination of all different parts of bacteria and fungi. And it's like it's the slime in your mouth. It's the kind of, when your drain gets that whole goopy thing, and even the film in the dog's bowl is a biofilm. You got to remove that. But that, when it's a good biofilm, it is healthy to have it there because it's protecting it from other foreign things. But if it's a disrupted biofilm because the animal's been on antibiotics or NSAIDs or has had chlorine in their water or is eating glyphosate in their food and is doing stuff, it's not allowing the normal flow of things to come in and out of there. So many of our animals, yeah.
So in the mouth, it would be a combination of saliva and mucus and dead bacterial body and stuff.
Right, and live bacteria bodies. I mean, it's just
and live, just that whole mishmash. And sometimes that's a healthy mishmash, which is what you've got with your dogs, because it's actually repelling and getting rid of tartar. And of course, for most dogs, it's unhealthy. Now, to what degree is that biofilm influenced by diet?
Oh, huge. First of all, most of the commercial foods have preservatives and dyes, and I mean, they've taken a lot of them out of there because of all the consciousness of the consumer and a lot of new companies. But if there's glyphosate in there, which is Roundup, glyphosate has a patent as an antibiotic. So if we're feeding that every single day to our animals, what are we doing to that delicate balance in the gut? I don't know, but I don't think it's very healthy. So feeding organic, feeding fresh, and fermented is adding more diversity to it too.
Okay, so very much the diet you feed is affecting that film, and it's also affecting the microbiome in the mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay.
I mean, so you wonder, just as humans, if you drink a lot of alcohol, what are you doing to the biofilm in your mouth? If you have a good biofilm, it's probably not doing a good job to it. If you have a bad one, it's probably maybe helping you a little bit. But
well, Margo, don't be a buzzkill tonight. It's almost.
I know, but it's like you think about that. What things that we put in our mouths. What is it doing downstream? What is it doing right in your mouth? I mean, people are using, mouthwashes to try to kill this bacteria. Meanwhile, they're not putting something good in it. They're just killing it and not allowing something better to come in, a better probiotic, a better, mixture of stuff to come in.
Yeah.
So you're attacking for want of a better word, but we'll use the word attacking the gut from both ends. Are you choosing the bacteria that go in the front end different to those that go in the back end?
Well, we're trying to use our dogs who have been successful in both ends. So they have clean teeth and good poops.
So you're just using whatever you take from the front end of a healthy dog and the back end of a healthy dog.
Yeah, I mean, I've got. That's why the microbiome restorative therapy is the right word for what I do. So we've not only have taken the gut flora, but I've even taken the skin and ear flora and have gotten that to straighten up using that. So I have a case where the dog had, this is just a recent case because I decided to do it on this dog. It was a Cocker Spaniel with, those chronic ears with the red and the flame and everything. Woman did 2 years, 3 years of antibiotics and everything. And we did oral, rectal, fecal transplant. And I said, she had an ozone generator at home. And I said, I want you to ozonate those ears. And once you got rid of the biofilm, like I do with the gut, I gave her, my dogs are standard poodles and they've got lots of hair in their ears. So I took out a fresh wad of hair out of her ears, gave it to her in a paper bag. And I said, I want you to stuff it down in there and healed the ear.
Wow.
Now, isn't that cool?
That is absolutely fabulous. It tells us so much.
It's amazing. Well, the one I'm going to tell you, the case of Titan, which I think, I was talking to somebody the other day. I think this case of Titan has culminated 45 years of my practice. 45 years of trying to figure it out. You want me to talk about Titan?
Yeah, let's a quick summary of who Titan is.
Okay. So Titan came last year in 2022, was hit by a car, had a fractured L7, which is a lumbar vertebrae, and had a sacral luxation, and was taken to the veterinary school and they found pain and motor on one leg, and the other leg the dog could barely use. And they basically told her, he's 14 months old. He's not going to have bladder control. He's not going to have fecal control. He's shattered so much in that back, in those nerves. Please euthanize this dog. And the owner said, he's 14 months old. He's my love. He's like the best dog ever. I can't euthanize him. So they sent her to the other part of the campus. And again, 2 surgeons came out and said, you got to euthanize this dog. You'll never have bladder control. He's not like a 10-pound dog. You're going to have this big dog that we can probably get him to use 3 legs, and the other one he'll drag, but he'll never get bladder control. I see him 9 weeks later. He has been on chloramphenicol because he has a fecalis resistant UTI that smells like dead fish. He had excoriating diarrhea, and his tail, under that little Rottweiler tail, was bleeding. He was fearful and insecure, and he was so traumatized. He just leaned against the wall of my clinic and smeared feces and blood all over. If you can close the doors, yeah, blood all over the sides of the wall. And the dog was smelt so bad from all the feces. So anyway, long story short, and this case can take me 20 minutes. We did ozone. We did aquapuncture through the ozone over his back. We did UVBI, which is ultraviolet blood therapy, to try to took him off the chloramphenicol. And just FYI, the chloramphenicol, the owner was told, do not touch these pills because you can't touch them. You have to wear gloves. They never said, where is it supposed to be going? It's going to urine. What do you do with that? That's got chloramphenicol in it too, right? Well, their 3-year-old stepped in it, ended up in the emergency room, head to toe with body rash in the ER with a real serious issue. So it's a public health issue when they cannot get them balanced with their gut and and using antibiotics. So day 1, we treated him with ozone, laser, acupuncture, homeopathy, herbs, and started oral microbiome because I didn't want to waste it on a gut that was full of chloramphenicol. So we started on day 1. Day 2, he was home. Day 3, we did the same thing. On day 4, he actually wagged his tail for the first time, and in the 9 weeks. That's day 4. Day 5, I finally gave him a fecal transplant. Did the same treatment with the ozone, flushing the bladder, doing ozone over his back, doing the UVBI. Gave him the fecal transplant. Day 5. Day 6. This is day 6, right? She calls me. He walked 2 miles, peed and pooped on his own with normal stools, and urinated on his own with clear urine.
Wow.
Now, I was like in shock. I mean, she was in shock. She's a nursing student. She couldn't believe it. So I started to really put it together. We did the acupuncture to try to relieve the fascia that was, and when I did the aquapuncture on him, when I put my needles through, I've never had this happen before. I literally felt like I was screwing my needles through beef jerky instead of letting, when my needles go in, when I do acupuncture, it slides in. And I was just cranking it through this deep fascia that was so adhered because of the scarring and it was terrible. Mm-hmm. So this is day 6. That dog walked 2 miles and had bladder tone and anal tone back. and normal stools. Now that to me was not going to happen just by stopping chloramphenicol. Okay. So that's really how everybody would say, well, it was going to get better anyway, because that's how they treat integrative medicine, that it was going to get better anyway. Right. So the dog was great, doing 2 miles, great, feeling great. His personality completely came back. Happy, playful. He was walking around so sad and depressed. So the whole mental health came back as well. So the owner calls me 3.5, 4 weeks later and says he has blood in his urine. And I said, can you bring a urine sample in, right? And so so if he had crystals and he had a high pH. And I said to her, I've always wanted to do a urine transplant. And she says, well, I'm a nursing student. And I said, I can't find it anywhere in the literature. Would you be willing to do it? She goes, I want to be the first one. You've got to do it on my dog. So I said, okay. Yay. So I took a catheter, didn't flush it with any ozonate saline, but just put ozone gas in it like we did the fecal transplant, and put like 60 cc's of ozone gas at about 41 micrograms. Held the dog, let it sit there for a little bit because you want it to, in seconds, it's doing its job, but left the catheter in for about 7 or 8 minutes at least before I did anything else. I think I waited about 15 minutes. And then I got a free catch urine from my donors who have never been on antibiotics. And I put like 30 cc's of urine from my dog that I had caught in a sterile cup, not from a tap, because I wasn't going to do that to my dog, to traumatize her. And then put that in there. And the next day, I had to wait like 6 hours. He walked 5 miles. He had even more energy than he had. So this case has just been like whipping me around with impossible ways of doing something. And the urine transplant, why not? People always said urine is sterile. It's never been sterile. It's sterile because they can only isolate 6 to 12 things. There's probably 100 things in there, but nobody's been able to identify bacteriophages and fungi, and they're only culturing out strep or E. coli or fecalis or whatever is going in the bladder. But we know so little about these places. And we know there's microbiome in the heart. We know it's in the kidneys. We know it's in the eye. We know it's in the ear canals. We know all that stuff. But we don't even know what they are because we don't have diagnostics that can tell us what these species are.
Wow.
Yeah. And that dog has been totally fine. In the videos that I have, you would never even know that he had an injury. He is running and jumping off things. It's a completely different dog.
Dr. Roman, I have a couple thoughts on that. So first of all, the doctors that told you to euthanize him could definitely not come back to you and say he would have gotten better on his own.
Well, that's why this was so clear that they had taken care of it for 9.5 weeks. And they kept telling her he's never going to have urine continence. He's never going to have fecal continence, and you're dealing with this, having to catheterize and express his bladder. So if the neurotransmitters from the gut could help the spine bring back the neurotransmitter components that it needs to function, that's what I think happened.
Boom. That was my third question. So I appreciate that. People are probably wondering, well, how does a fecal transplant help a dog that's been hit by a car and is virtually paralyzed in a few areas? So that's an amazing.
So we know all the precursors from the neurotransmitters come from the gut.
Yep.
That's been decided actually almost 15 years ago.
Yep.
So they knew, but they didn't know which ones and which ones. I mean, I had my first case where I put that deduction where I had 2 dogs that were trying to kill each other, a brother and a sister, wire hair fox terrier. And the dog had GI problems, had all these other skin problems and all this stuff. And I treated him for his GI problem. I gave him the fecal transplant. This is over 12 years ago. Gave him a fecal transplant for his gut. And all of a sudden he's kissing and grooming his sister. And I thought the precursors of oxytocin have to come from the gut, because my dogs groom and love each other. They're kissing each other all the time. And this owner worked at Mass General and her husband worked at Mass College of Pharmacy. They're really bright people. And they were like, this is the 2 dogs we wanted. We bought 2 puppies that we thought would love each other. And he's been trying to eat her and kill her, and so they were totally like cleaning, like he was like mesmerized by her. Like he loved her, like my dogs do with each other. Right. Wow. And I was so excited. So this is just to tell you, he was doing great for 2.5 weeks. She gave him a heartworm pill, Interceptor. And 24 hours later, he almost killed her.
Ooh.
And we know that the heartworm pill kills the microbiome.
Ooh.
So ivermectin kills the gut. I mean, it was developed as an antibiotic for the intestinal tract, and mobamycin oxamine is a very similar compound. And so all these things that we're giving them with like Bravecto and Simparica Trio and these interceptors, and then all the heartworm and flea and tick products, they are disrupting the gut balance. And so every time you put that on your dog, and especially these ones that are on there 24/7, what are you doing to the gut? You're sabotaging its ability to care for that animal. It's terrible.
Yeah. Well, the art of veterinary medicine is clearly something that you believe in practice. And, here you are trying to make a last ditch effort to save this dog. And so you decided to, with the owner, to do this urine transplant.
Mm-hmm.
And, you're in what I love about, I'll just say, doctors like you, human and veterinary, is that you have the wonder and the appreciation of what nature can do, and you can make those connections, as opposed to, well, gee, it's not in the literature, we're not going to even try it, so let's just euthanize this dog.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for that. But when you think about it, we get blood transfusions, we don't think anything about it.
Right.
I would rather have fecal transplant than a blood transfusion, because you don't. At least you don't. When people get screened for being a donor for blood, you don't know if they're going to have their bipolar. They could lie on this. You could get all these crazy things in your system, as well as you don't know if they're going to die from cancer in 3 weeks. I mean, I don't know if my dogs are going to die from cancer in 3 weeks. I hope not. But you put that into your bloodstream.
Yeah.
I mean, we're doing it on things that are exiting. You're forcing that by an IV into your blood, and that's okay. But a fecal transplant, the FDA won't let us do it unless you have C. diff. And it's like, but you're giving them a blood transfusion that is much more invasive into the body than doing a fecal transplant.
Dr. Roman, this whole blood transfusion thing just today was on my mind, because I'm going to donate some blood to simply get rid of it, about a pint every quarter, and also to donate it. But what occurred to me was, wait a second. And the reason I'm doing that is, depends. I have no condition, but it's a wellness practice. It's over the age of 50. All you're doing is accumulating iron, and you're storing it in your tissues. And so one of the best ways you can the only way that we know of that you can get rid of it is by donating blood. It should be a regular practice. So that's one of the reasons I'm doing it. But the thought occurred to me, gee, how many people are toxic with iron, and it's in this blood? They're not taking iron out of this blood, and you get a transfusion. Then you've got all the genetic history and the history of vaccinations and medicines and SSRIs and all these things that are in this blood. It's crazy to think about it. Just like,
I know, but and you can get blood at every hospital has blood. They've been doing blood transfusions for 100 years or more.
Yeah.
So, but if we could get the microbiome, to be identified and know what each of these diseases are missing in their gut, so if Mrs. Jones in Topeka, Kansas has MS, and Mrs. Smith in Oregon has the microbiome to balance her out. So that's how you would treat it, and if you have, pancreatic inflammation, and you have somebody who has really great balance of their gut, and you can treat it that way versus a drug. I think that's going to be the future of medicine. And I think it's going to be the future of veterinary medicine too, that we utilize the animal's own immune system to help it heal.
What about this? I mean, what about this dog that we're hearing about? Dr. Becker and Rodney Habib just visited this dog,
Yeah,
Bobby.
the dog from Portugal. Yeah, I didn't see the piece.
Yeah,
I want that dog's microbiome. I tried to send him an email saying, let's get that microbiome, and let's get the best microbiomes around the world and bring them together and figure out, these longevity animals that are living to high end. I mean, I've had my clients' animals live to 21, 22, and I have one dog's, and some of them, I should have collected them before they passed, kind of thing. I have one that I collected that's 19 and a half that we got its microbiome, and we have very little of it. And, you know, and like my own dog, Geneva, who's the great-great-grandmother, I have a cryo freezer and I've frozen their poops for 12 years. I mean, I've been, you know, storing it to use it. And she had mammary adenocarcinoma for 7.5 years and died when she was 15. So what let her live 7 years with malignant cancer?
Wow.
Like, what made her live that long? So just recently, I did a fecal transplant on a cat that had mammary adenocarcinoma, and a female cat. And we did a transplant with her and then my cat donors. So we went to the cryo freezer. We got a small little bit of her microbiome that's been frozen for, about 15 years or so. And then we took that out and mixed that with the cat's fecal. And the cat's doing great. I mean, there's just a fecal transplant after all the surgery. The cat is feeling so much better. So anyway, these are things. And once you start thinking about what you can do, if you can improve 80% of the immune system with a fecal transplant, it's what I start right away with. So I have a dog, anything. They come in, they've been coming from a shelter or coming from a pet store and have had 20 vaccinations and dewormed with Panicure and metronidazole, and they've completely sabotaged that animal's immune system. They've taken it and just let's squish it out of there, right?
Wow.
And so if we can take those young puppies and initially inoculate them with the protected microbiome that I've been taking care of for 30 years and give them that boost, the hope is that will help them. And interestingly, about 4 months ago, I had 2 puppies that came into my clinic, and I didn't remember the puppies because they were little, and they both were from abandoned situations at the shelter and were told by that owner that there would be mental issues with these dogs, that one was a pit bull and one was a shepherd mix. And of course she came in, and this was just so weird. The dogs came in and they looked me right in the eye and they were so happy to see me. I didn't recognize them, but one of them, I said, this dog acts just like my dog Apple. I mean, it's like my dog. It's, I can see that dog's expression is just like my dog. And so I thought, do I know these dogs, you know? And so I went back and they both had fecal transplants as puppies.
Wow.
So that energy of, and they both were, they were acting like poodles. One was a pit bull and one was a shepherd. And they were like, you know, like my silly poodles, you know? So anyway.
Wow. What?
It's very exciting. It's
what you're saying, Margo.
Thank you, because I never would have gone down that line with raw and protection, because I lost my spleen in veterinary school and I was told, do not touch raw meat. And I'd stay on antibiotics for the rest of your life and don't be a veterinarian. I lost it in vet school, right? And they said, you cannot touch raw meat. So I didn't touch raw meat for like the first few years with my kids until I started to feed the dogs. And I thought, I'm going to die from salmonella and E. coli because I don't have a spleen. And they told me I'll die if I get salmonella and E. coli. I think it made me stronger. I think it helped my immune system by being exposed to this stuff. But I was told by Brigham and Women's, Tufts Medical, do not touch raw meat. And then I'm like feeding raw meat, being around raw meat.
Wow.
And now I'm feeding poop. So it's a real, you know.
Do you think you're taking poop from animals that are healthy, or ones that are healthy but have a problem, like mammary cancer or whatever? Was it ovarian? I'm not sure what cancer was now.
Mammary cancer. Anyway, mammary cancer, yeah.
Mammary, yeah. And then giving it to another animal. It's a very individual thing, where the genetics of that animal and the microbiome it got from its mum and its history of what it's eaten, all of those things have contributed to producing this unique microbiome. There's probably no way that can be duplicated on a large scale, I would imagine.
I don't, I know that Animal Biome and Texas A&M are all, Texas A&M is working with Purina, and Animal Biome is working with Hills. And they're going to try to find something that they can scoop in to put in the food, that they can make something that will work. I look at my dogs as each individuals and each individual personalities, and their health, and I want to share that with as many people as we can. And so having it as part of something, adding it in, and, if we can make it more available to so many more people and divert. I mean, and my dogs may not be the best. Right now they're considered the best in the world, but there may be dogs, like I said, that are 23 years old and running around and really healthy and no history of cancer. My dogs have had cancer, but they've lived with it for years and years. So can we get away from cancer? I don't know. I don't know any dogs that are living. I mean, maybe this dog in Portugal is the one that we should all be seeding everybody's gut with, and looking at it, I saw a picture of it. It looks obese, but maybe that's okay to be obese and live to 30. I mean, yeah, maybe that's what we all should do. Become obese and live to 30. But I think we need the microbiome to help us. We really do.
Margo, this is the type of medicine that is individualized. It can't be mass produced. It can't make money. But that has to be the medicine of the future. It is the medicine of the past. We have gone through this phase of promoting drugs and everything else, and we can see the damage that that's all doing. When I was a young student, a veterinarian, Tom Hungerford, who was head of the Postgraduate Foundation, he started a series of articles. He said, I want you vets out there to write down what he called the blood, the dung, and the guts. So that's interesting, of what you do. I don't care about the niceties of practice or of research or anything else. Tell me what works, how you do it. And I want to publish that so other vets can use it. And I think really the education now has to look at, well, okay, a veterinarian should be trained to say, well, I can identify these dogs that are really well. They're on a good diet. We have to classify what that is. That's another story. We now take their poop and transplant it into these other dogs that have this particular problem. But it's the art and the science of medicine. The two must be married together. And that's the way we need to approach the medicine of the future. Not as something that is made by big pharma and produced on a mass scale to make money, but is actually, you have healers who are using science and their understanding of nature, and nature is just the sum total of evolution to this point, and that's what it is. There's nothing else, and using that as the medicine, this understanding, and this is where education has to proceed. We can build on everything else we know, but we have to say yes, but these are the limitations, and this is where we could enhance this. And this is just a learning process.
I agree. When
well,
in the lecture that you gave at HVMA in 2019, I came up to you and I talked about this chronological history of the earth. And if you look at where the microbiome was, everything created from it. So all the species, all the plants, all the invertebrates, all came from that prokaryotes, and it all started from there. And so here we are taking this life force, and it's creating all these new life forces. And now we're trying to kill the life force that's first started us all, because we're 10% of our body is cells and the rest is microbiome. So we're really just a structure of cells holding up this microbiome. And so how do we protect that, and how do we enhance it so it protects us and protects our animals, and we don't keep destroying it? And I think it's really hard because we are so used to using chemicals. Just put this spot on, get no fleas for 3 months. What are you killing your dog with? You're killing its microbiome. You're killing the dog. But, you won't have a flea. Well, you still will probably have a flea, but your dog will also get cancer and autoimmune disease. And then you'll be like, oh, but I didn't have fleas. So,
it's the old thing of tossing the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah,
but
and Dr.
I was going to say, it's wonderful that you guys are getting into adding something to the diet that can enhance it. Getting the people to understand that they can't be giving that and then poisoning their dog at the same time. So they're like, they're stepping on the brake and the gas at the same time, and it's gonna help, but it's not. You're gonna keep killing. You're gonna break. Ruin the machine, because it's like yes, no, to try to enhance it and then keep it enhanced by giving more of this and protecting it is, I think, the way to get them healthier.
I've also been doing a little bit of research lately, Margo, because for many years people are saying, oh, the dog's acid is much stronger than humans. And I've always doubted this. I think we both have very similar stomach acids, and it appears from the papers I've been reading that actually looked at this and measured it, that's absolutely true. And one of the things they're saying is that because of that stomach acid, a lot of bacteria that we know about anyway, and that's an important point too, are not getting through because they're being killed. So I thought to myself, well, that is why fecal transplants are so important, because you're actually bypassing that protective barrier up the front end, which may be killing good bacteria and good archaea and whatever else that you want, and actually popping it in the back end so that they don't have to pass that protective barrier. So to my mind, that is a real benefit, or for want of a better word, of actually doing getting the microbiome inside the dog, a benefit of doing it through the rectum rather than through the mouth.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, we do the fecal transplants with them awake, with the ozone, and where it's done for, how it's recommended through ACVIM, which is the board certified, is putting them under general anesthesia, making a slurry of about 200 cc's, and just like whitewashing the walls of the colon, and then waking them up and they poop it all out. And the success that they get is so small compared to what we get. We get like 95% success. They get 20, 15, 30%. So it really is the quality of the donor, the technique of doing it, and the support that we do to try to nurture it and keep it going versus just blasting it and then you're okay, you got the fecal transplant. It doesn't stay. It's not being nurtured. It's not being cultivated. It's just blown against a wall, and then the next fecal just sort of drags it out, right?
So on what basis did they devise their protocol?
On the human basis. So for fecal transplants, when I first started going to fecal transplant lectures and doing stuff like that, because I had been doing it and I started going to the medical conferences, the way that they do the fecal transplants for humans is they put the people on vancomycin and metronidazole. This is for C. diff only. So they're trying to kill the biofilm with very strong antibiotics. And then they use a nasogastric tube and they injected the slurry that way. That was how most of them were done. And I have a case that will blow your mind if you want to hear it. I don't know if we have time to hear it because, but it was my sister's. Do we have time to talk about this? Is amazing. This will blow your mind.
Sure. You
Okay.
just a couple minutes.
So my sister's boyfriend's mother, who was 86 years old, 84 years old at the time. How many years? It's been 84. She had C. diff. Okay. And she had been hospitalized twice. She had an atonic bladder. She was in a diaper, was on antibiotics, has Parkinson's, can't walk because she can't take her Parkinson's medication, and is in a wheelchair and is demented. Okay.
Wow.
So my sister meets her. Her name's Doris, and she's happy to tell her story, and she'll tell you. So when my sister told me about her, I said, oh, she's got C. diff. Get her a fecal transplant. And it was like, that's disgusting. We are not going to talk about that. Is really gross. And we're not going to do a fecal. This is like 12 years ago now. I said, get her a fecal transplant. And they said, she's not going to do that. So she's she's so debilitated. They're putting her in a nursing home. She can't take care of herself. She doesn't have any memory of anything. She's just like just as in pain all the time from the C. diff. So I said, get her a fecal transplant. So Medicare won't cover a fecal transplant unless you had 2 separate hospitalizations. 3. She had 2. And she told them, I will never go back in. It was so painful. All the drugs, I can't do it. I will die before you put me in the hospital. So I said, pay out of pocket. Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles was something like $9,000. Mayo Clinic was something like $6,000. And Scripps Institute was like $750. So they drove to Scripps Institute in San Diego, took 5 minutes. They put a nasogastric tube down her throat, gave her the fecal transplant. I called her 5 days later because you couldn't talk to her before. She was so demented. She said, I can actually think a thought through my brain, and I can take my Parkinson's medication, so I'm standing on my own. And I thought, that's great. 5 weeks. This is 5 weeks later. My sister and her boyfriend, they can't find her. She's at the mall with her friends, has her brain capacity back 100%. And her bladder tone is, everything is totally normal. She is back to being normal after years of being demented and not able to walk, not able to do anything, barely eat because she's so painful. 5 months later, my sister had never met her except in a wheelchair with demented. She said, I don't know who this woman was. She looked like she was 55 years old. She's running around. So they put her in the assisted living, or not the nursing home, but the assisted living. She runs their athletic department and their whole activity department. But she's, and I talk to her every year, and she doesn't know how to thank me for, I mean, I did not treat her. I'm not a physician. I am a veterinarian, but I was encouraging her to do this, and she doesn't know how to thank me. She says, I have my brain capacity back 100. How did that happen? Right?
Wow.
How did that happen? And I've told this story to medical conferences at medical schools. And I've had other people that have done it, and they come back and they said, it changed my whole life. It totally changed my ability to think and to process, because that gut-brain connection is so real. And that's what we see in these animals, that they get this, they're happy again. They're out playing ball. I mean, I had a dog that was doing chemo and radiation and everything else, and he would go through all that, and we would give him a fecal transplant. He'd come in like, give him the next day. I gave him a puppy poop, and he'd be out throwing balls in the air. She hadn't done that since he was 2 years old. And his mental health was like back again as a young dog. So this is why when you see those things and you think back and you go, oh my God, that is like amazing, right? That's like so amazing. And that was with this woman who, got the one fecal transplant.
Wow. Dr. Roman, tell me what you use probiotics, pills, powders? If so, why? And if no, why?
Okay. So I've been using probiotics for 35 years. For my whole practice. So very early in my career, I was using omega-3 fatty acids. I was using probiotics. I was using spirulina, organic stuff. I've been doing that since my parents were doing cod liver oil and all that stuff for us with kids, molasses and flax, so I was always doing that as a practitioner, was adding these nutraceuticals or nutritional products into the food. And I was using a lot of probiotics before I started. And I do that a little bit with the fecal transplant. But my feeling is the fecal transplant is 500 species and 1,000 subspecies. There's no probiotic that is even touches that. So to have it given in a balanced way with the microbiome in its components, that it all meshes together, is way better than 6 probiotics or 10 probiotics or 40 probiotics. There's 500 and 1,000 subspecies. So how do we get that balance in? I think the best thing is giving the microbiome. Giving some probiotics I think are good, but too much probiotics is going to put them out of balance and make them all skewed this way, because they're all of those species versus something that's been in play for generations.
Yeah. I think Dr. Billinghurst and I are on the same page where, we talk about them being great for therapeutic dosages or use in an extreme, you're out of balance. It's a great way to, Band-Aid the situation. Why do you use it with the fecal? I'm just curious.
Well, what I use with them is if they've been on a lot of antibiotics, I use a product called Nutrigest, which is Rob Silver's product. And it's fructosaccharides, it's ginger, it's got a little probiotic, it's got digestive enzymes. So when I give the fecal transplant, I nurture it. So I give this product that has digestive enzymes and ways of sort of balancing the gut. And then I use standard process enteric support, which is desiccated jejunum, ileum. So I'm feeding them the raw components as a glandular. And then I use colostrum, because the studies have shown that the mother's milk has a sugar in it that they never understood why it was given to the baby, because there's no way the baby could digest it, but it's only to feed the microbes. So I want to nurture the microbes, right? I want to give them something that they can get care, right? And then I use Zachary Bush's product called Gut Biome. And that is humic and fulvic acid coming from ancient peat moss. And I met Zachary when he first came out with this product, and he came to a conference and begged him if I could try it on animals. And so I've been using that. So those 4 things are part of the nurturing that I do to help that gut get started. But I use it with our gut, which is to try to not multiply it, but keep it going, because some animals, I think, just kill it off. They're so toxic that they need to have it more than just one time. And I have several clients that animals had both 2 of these dogs had spent $40,000 at referral hospitals before they came to me. And that was 5 years ago. And they had put up their hands. They couldn't spend any more money. And those dogs have been taking poop every day. And that's what keeps them going. So they get our poop capsules every day, or a piece of poop every day.
Margo, I've somewhere along the line, I heard that we're vaginally born individuals pick up the microbiome from their mum, which then obviously sits in the crypts and in all the crevices within their gut over time. And that's the stable microbiome for many individuals that must be maintained. But if their diet is wrong, it doesn't feed the right ones. I'm just wondering whether changing the diet from something that is incorrect to something correct is one of the reasons that original microbiome may be allowed to flourish and restore a lot of the health to the individual.
Well, that's a hope, is that if we've given them a good diet, but if this is the issue, okay? If you're not born vaginally, you do not get the vaginal gulp. You do not get that exposure from the beginning. So my dogs are 7 generations that I know were vaginally born. I know that 1 or 2 of them before, but they weren't in my care. So if you have a C-section, and the mother had a C-section, and the grandmother had a C-section, and she was on antibiotics, that exchange may have never occurred in that 3rd or 4th generation. And now that's the one you're using for breeding. So, here we have how many years that we've had antibiotics? You've had them your entire career, right? I've been practicing 45 years, and we've had antibiotics, and I used antibiotics all the time. I was like, that's what we have to treat it with. You have an infected paw, use antibiotics. I haven't used antibiotics in my practice. In the last 5 years, I've only prescribed it 1 time, and that was for a ruptured pyometra. And otherwise, I use ozone, ultraviolet light therapy. I'm treating MRSA with ozone and fecal transplants. If they have a bad infection, I give them fecal and ozone, and they recover in 2 or 3 days. So my feeling is, give the tools to the body to repair itself. Don't keep drugging it down so it's trying to get up there and you keep pushing it back down again.
Margo, is anybody out there in veterinary authority land listening?
I don't know. I've written letters to I wrote a letter to the AVMA. I wrote a letter to anytime I write letters and I send them the cases, and the pyometra case is up on the board. I sent it to the AVMA, sent it to Angel Memorial. I sent it to anyone that I thought had some, show us your double-blinded studies. Okay. Well, I can't. I don't have ruptured pyometras. That's the first one I've ever had in my career, So I mean,
and as if you would,
I said to them, a ruptured pyometra. I have a video. You can watch it on my website. The pus is pouring out of the hole. I have never seen that. This dog was supposed to be euthanized. She came. It wasn't my client, but it was a friend. And I saw her, and she was crying. And I said, "What's going on?" She said, "I'm taking my dog to be euthanized. I don't know what's wrong with it. We had blood work done. We spent over $1,000. They don't know." And the dog came in. It was comatose, and it was on the ground. And I said, "What's wrong with the dog?" I said. She said, "Well, I said the dog spayed," and she said, "No." I said, "You know what? Before you euthanize it, let me just see. Maybe it's a pyometra. Like maybe it's only a 7-year-old Labrador." So I said, "Let me just rush it into surgery." So I made a tiny incision, and pus just pours out. I'm like, "Oh God, what is this?" So I opened it up, and there were adhesions all over this uterus. And according to one of my clients, who is a forensic pathologist in human medicine, it ruptured 72 hours before from the pictures that I showed her. So this dog had collapsed 72 hours before. And here I am. I'm not a surgeon in that I have a big surgery suite with recovery. And I actually had one of my staff who just came from that kind of a hospital, and she was my assistant. And I'm telling people, well, I don't want to tell them that it's impossible to heal. So I took that uterus out. I flushed the whole abdomen with ozone. I gave the dog IV UVBI. I did all the things that I do. And I don't have overnight hospitalization. I started the surgery at noon. And at 5 o'clock, I had to leave. Dog was sitting up drinking ozonated water. It came in comatose. And so I said, well, this is the time I need antibiotics, right? So I started on antibiotics. I only kept it on it for 3 days. And then we gave it a fecal transplant and she was fine. So if you don't have the tools of ozone, and that's the big piece here, that veterinarians around the world are learning ozone therapy. There are over 1,000 in Brazil. There's over 300 in Japan. And when I went to Japan, there was not one veterinarian using ozone. And now there's 300 that are using ozone. And it is such an important tool to help us reduce all the infection and biofilm and stimulating stem cells. And it goes in the colon. Ozone stimulates stem cells. And in the crypts of the colon, the depth of the colon, are the stem cells of the columnar cells. So my thought is when we throw the ozone in there, not only are we disrupting the biofilm, but we're saying, wake up colon cells. It's time for you to start doing your job. And then they start growing. And that's why, irritable bowel and all these things repair themselves with ozone.
And Dr. Roman, my pool and spa when I had one, were run on ozone. So I got to save a lot of,
Chlorine,
toxic exposure to chlorine or, shocking and all that. We have about 2 minutes left. So I want to just go right back to one really, I think it's a critical point. Let's just remind people how many species a dog has of good bacteria and subspecies. Just real quick.
I don't know. The terms that I use are talking about a human. So if you have a 50-pound dog and you have a 150-pound human, there's probably a proportional change, right? Yeah. So they say 100 trillion microbes in a normal human being. And there's 1 trillion in your mouth. And when dentists or veterinarians, this is a peeve of mine, automatically put your dog on antibiotics for dental, I think that is so bad because I haven't used antibiotics for dental in 30 years. And I do dogs with heart murmurs and I use ozone. We flush the mouth with ozone. We use ozonated oils. We do UVBI if they have a heart problem because we don't want any bacteria going into causing a problem. But when they blindly put them on clindamycin post-dental, to me is sabotaging that dog. They have never taken a culture. I've never seen one culture on any dental that I've ever seen. And if you look at the distribution of the microbiome in the mouth, there are completely different colonies than there are and completely different colonies back there. So if you don't take a culture of every single one of those roots that you pulled out, culture it, and then you can only document maybe 12 species. So if there are 100 trillion in there and you're documenting 12 species, it's a joke. It's like pretending you're doing something. Yeah. But where ozone will clean it all out, get rid of the biofilm. And after you use the ozone in the mouth, the gums start to heal like right away. You can see them. They're not red anymore. They're pink.
The ozone therapy, Margo, how is it actually delivered? Can you just
I have, that's why I was going to show you the slideshow, but ozone, you have an ozone generator, you use pure surgical oxygen, you run it through the generator. And that's when you use a pull thing, you're not using that. And then we put it into saline, we bubble it into saline. And then we use that saline, or you can make it water and use it for water. You can, use it for, you can bag it with ozone, but if you're going to breathe it or have any exposure to breathing, we always bubble it through olive oil, which makes ozonides so that you can actually, use it. And so, or not and breathe it. So I do it for coronavirus. I mean, I've treated a cat with coronavirus back in almost 20 years ago. Everyone died except the cat that I treated with ozone. Wow. They all died. So it works for coronavirus. And then I had a dog during the pandemic that was PCR positive for corona, and had been on 2 different antibiotics with Vicodin, a bunch of anti-coughing medications and stuff, was hacking his brains out. He came for ozone and UVBI, and I gave him a fecal transplant, stopped coughing in the car on the way home. So it works for viruses, it works for fungi, and it's such an inexpensive tool that every veterinarian can afford to put it in their practice. and offer it to people. And people can get their own ozone generators and have it at the home themselves. My mother has one. She loves it. She thinks it's her fountain of youth. She drinks it, she's 94 and she thinks it's what's kept her going.
Margo, this sort of therapy would wreck most veterinary practices if
No, it
everybody
won't. It would
if everybody practiced it, because we would have so many well animals, there'd be no work for vets.
Well, no, I think that veterinarians would have more time to learn more things. Let's look at it that way, right? Instead of trying to.
I was being facetious. I wasn't suggesting.
No, I know that. I know that. I'm just saying, yeah, if every veterinarian had this in their practice, they would. I don't know how to practice without ozone. I really don't. I don't use antibiotics. So if I don't have a tool that I cannot use, and the AVMA is telling us not to use antibiotics, and they're saying you must be judicious. You must know exactly what. But then they don't tell us what to do. They just say
they give you no alternative.
They don't give any alternative. Then you sit there and go, well, what am I supposed to do? I don't know anything else. And this is something that is so simple to learn. It's not like you have to go to acupuncture school and study for 3 years. It is easily adapted to any veterinary practice.
Learn yeah.
Actually, I'm listening to you talk again, and a lot of what you do in practice cannot be studied scientifically with our current scientific tools. However, ozone therapy they could be doing some they could be
they have. I mean, we're trying. There's a woman who is in Cuba right now, and we're trying to get her to immigrate to the United States, and she's been doing ozone research for over 23 years. She graduated vet school. She wrote part of this book, and the veterinary book is ozone therapy with Sylvia Menendez and her had a research lab in Cuba, and trying to get her out of there so that she can do more research here. But she's done all different kind of animal studies. I mean, there's hundreds of references, hundreds of them. And you can read, there's hundreds of stuff. There's many organizations.
What was that lady's name?
Her name is Zule Zamaro.
Oh,
Zule Zamaro. And she's trying to get grants now to do some studying, and when she gets out of Cuba, and do it on the microbiome and ozone. And I think there should be lots of funding out there, because the microbiome, if anyone's out there and knows about funding to help her get started here, to understand that, because when I went to speak at the Target Discovery conference almost 10 years ago, and I was I'm peon veterinarian. There were all the universities and medical schools and all this kind of stuff. And I'm talking about my first fecal transplant, where I literally took my finger and went up my dog's rear end and dropped it in the other dog's mouth. I said, it's literally a slam and dunk thing. And they were all talking about, I have $3.2 million of venture capital, and I have 1.7, and I literally have this, right? And I said, and that dog completely cleared up. This was a dog that was dying. and that Stoven case is a great case. But it made me realize that, we have so many beautiful things that these bodies are taking care of us, and we're trying to kill them all the time. We're sabotaging health,
Margo, I have a series of slides that point out a dog licking its own genitals, licking another dog's genitals, and all that. And I'm just using it to illustrate the fact that we shouldn't sterilize their food.
Right.
And now I am learning so much more from you, as what's also going on is that they're actually sampling somebody else's microbiome.
Exactly. I mean, when they eat poop, they're inoculating themselves. But what you want them to do is, dogs self-medicate all the time. Yeah. But if I can give them a good quality thing to add, not something that has been on a bunch of drugs and stuff, but a really high quality microbiome, that's the goal, is to try to, bring that to another level.
Well, Dr. Roman, first and foremost, maybe you can send the picture for Ian's slide presentation of your finger up the one dog and in the mouth of the other. He would appreciate that, I'm sure. Yeah.
1 second. Question.
It's chew like a block of beef frozen.
Yes. Okay. Just leave it for her to make in the morning.
I cut the meat for her.
Okay. Great.
Like it, but it's not as much meat.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Yeah, we're just getting our dog's food ready for tomorrow.
Yeah,
so my dog, just to put a point out there, my dog, my first 3 generations are raw fed. Everyone's raw fed. Okay. First 3 generations are about 92% meat, 90% meat. Okay. 85% meat. This generation is 92% plant. And we put in raw meat. So they get raw meat to feed the microbes that need putrefied meat. And I use all the plant because I want to be more sustainable. I cannot, and I've given this statistic. I talked to Rob about this statistic, is to raise one 70-pound dog for 11 years. What's the impact on our earth for their meat only? The meat only. It's 8 million gallons of water, 180 tons of grain, 365,000 miles worth of petroleum to bring the food to those animals and then to take them to slaughterhouses, packing houses, and all that. 5.5 acres of forest or rainforest that has to be cut down to put the corn, soy, wheat, whatever you're growing, and most of it is genetically modified. But and then the tons of methane, CO2, and feces that are added to climate change and pollution, because these animals are fed in, glyphosate. So it's even more in our water stream, right? But the worst part is, a caring veterinarian, I'm going to tell that client with that new dog to kill 8,127 animals for one dog that weighs 70 pounds. It's unethical for me as a veterinarian who cares about animals to do that. So wherever I could reduce that and increase the plant product and do that. And so these last three litters that I have, now another one is 92% plant, and they're thriving, and they're just as big as the other ones. And I mean, I've bred down because the one that was the great grandmother was like an 85-pound standard poodle. She was way, way big. Now they're about 40 pounds. So I bred them down because I didn't, she had a gastric torsion, and I didn't want to ever see that again. So I did that to try to reduce the size of their chest, right? And so now these dogs are 40 to 45 pounds, standard poodles. And so, but, doing more plant is going to save our planet. And I think our dogs are thriving on it. So everybody says, you can't do it. You can't do it. You can't do it. You can't do it. And as somebody who's lecturing on raw diet for so long, I'm still using raw diet. I still believe in raw meat and raw, doing everything raw, but it's this much, not this much,
Can I ask a question? Are you using grains at all?
Some. So we soak what I can show. I mean, that's a whole nother slideshow.
Is it sprouted?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm using sprouted. I soak my beans for 48 hours and with alkaline water and
okay. Margo, this is a whole other conversation I'd love to have with you. I don't think we can have it right now.
Right. No, we can't. But I'm just saying that there's many components to why these dogs' microbiome is so good. But they're getting a lot of plant fiber, which is why these microbiomes love that. I mean, that's really,
of course they do.
Where they multiply on, right? So, and they're still getting the putrefied meat, but a very, very small percentage. I
really think this is just another brilliant conversation we can have in the future looking at that. Mm-hmm. But I think right now we don't want to confuse.
I gave you a lot of stuff, but I would love to share cases with you and show they'll blow your mind. I mean, they will blow your mind.
We're obviously, you don't need to convince us that plants are great. That's our business. We ferment plants. And we think it's great. You'll have to do a ton of convincing that, for me, that no matter what you feed, no matter what, that if the big companies don't get a hold of it and bastardize it, that you're going to be in any better position. And I consider myself an expert on climate change. I've been doing this for a very long time. I was taught by some big experts in the field. And once you get big business attached to anything, and I don't care if that's a Beyond Burger, I don't care if that is so-called greenwashing and regenerative farm washing. Mm-hmm. If you get them involved, watch out. It's gonna be the same old thing.
And I mean, the hope is that these big pharma companies see money being made to make something better. So they may not be making the drugs as much, but if they can make something that is better than what it was, and use herbs and use plants and use things that are, and there you see it. I mean, I can go on Chewy or any of these companies and order some of the natural stuff that I've been using for 25 years that you could never get on a place like that. So the herbal companies, you could never get it. I had to have it, so it is happening, and the consciousness of people is occurring, and you have wonderful summits and natural talking shows and natural magazines and Karen Becker and, all of these wonderful places that people are learning how to do more care to their animals, because we all cherish them. We love them. We don't want them to suffer. We don't want them to die early. We don't want to have huge veterinary bills. So how do you keep them healthy? And I think the core of it is the gut. So let's keep the gut healthy.
I so agree with you on that point. And I will just say, like, one of our missions with Gussys Gut is to be a purchaser of regenerative farm, biodynamic farmed, very healthy soil grown, good businesses. I think we have to get back to the farmers and know our farmers and appreciate them. They're feeding us, and they're feeding us healthy food, not glyphosate. And so I welcome this conversation as a whole entire topic, and I think it's a conversation we can't have enough. But I will say one little thing comes to my mind. My mother says very often, when we were young, when I was young, so this is in the early 70s, we don't remember people even walking their dog. People weren't walking their dogs. And I lived in California. And so even just to see the evolution of people purchasing dog walking and walking their own dogs, and the consciousness has increased to improve their food. I mean, it's definitely all going in an upward, although slow direction, but an upward direction. I'm happy about that.
I agree. I mean, people are anyway, I should have shut that off, but let me sorry, 1 second. Okay. Anyway. Okay. Well, I gotta go. I shouldn't have scheduled another lecture at 7:00.
Oh my gosh. It's been such a pleasure. So Margo, real quick, let's tell people where we can find you.
Okay. So you can read a lot about the microbiome from our two websites, the mashvet.com and the MBRT.life website. And so looking at those things, you can learn a lot more about it and understand why we're, encouraging people to appreciate and nurture that microbiome. Our MashVet website has a lot of videos that I do for our clients, and you're welcome to watch them and learn from them.
Great. On a personal note, I have seen your Dr. Do More videos on YouTube.
Oh, great. Okay.
And love them. And so for any vets that are out here listening that were sent this by a client, please go to YouTube, type in Dr. Do More, just DOMORE, and you'll be inspired by healers, people who are not only thinking in a unique way, but they're actually getting results, like Dr. Roman here.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we did that project to really highlight, what we're doing. We're doing more. Why can't we all do more? It's not, it takes years to study different modalities. I mean, to become good at as a homeopath, it's years of work, right? And to become good at acupuncture, same thing. But the fecal is something that everybody can do, and the ozone is everything everybody can do. So if you can get 80% just by that, like all the rest is cream, right? So,
well, thank you so much for being with us. This is this has been just great, and we're so lucky to have you in the world and helping animals and educating.
Well, it's important that we all talk about these things because again, I want to thank Ian because it was part of the road that I traveled. And, it's very interesting because I have always promoted the raw diet, and then switching from the raw to the plant. All the people that I taught about all the stuff that you do, they're all like, no, we can't use plants. And I'm like, but we have to, we have to take care of this earth. And I want my grandchildren to have a dog, and their kids to have a dog. And if we have cancer at 54% of dogs, and we didn't, when I was in vet school, we're not going to have animal. They'll live to 3 and they'll have to get a new one. I mean, they'll just be so chronically sick. And I don't want that. You love them too much. You don't want them to die with all these things.
In my first book, Margo, Give Your Dog a Bone, I talked extensively about plants and have done so ever since. But I've had people who don't understand what I've actually been talking about still today. And ozone and fecal is simple, and so is diet. So those three things,
absolutely, it's
if
like
the veterinary profession put them together, what a difference it could make. because everybody wants to make diet complicated, and it ain't. But
I agree.
that's my preaching now.
Yeah.
That's
But
what
it has to be have value to it. If it's just, you know, wasted stuff that everybody's byproduct that it doesn't have any life force in it or anything in it, I'm not sure it's going to
have value.
It has to have, it has to have, you know, good sources and stuff. But thank you guys so much. I'm so glad to connect to you, Ian, and do want to continue another call together and just exchange ideas, and love you for everything that you gave me too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, thanks for joining us today, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great night.
Great. You too. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.